Assalamu alaikum everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Hannah. I am a PA and a trauma and healing coach for Muslim women. I help Muslim women heal from trauma and reinvent themselves. If that's something you're looking for or interested in, you can always go to the links in my description and apply to join my trauma group coaching program or see what other options are available. So I had a client and we were having our session and she asked if we could spend some time looking at something else other than what the session was planned for. And she said, I had a really rough week and this particular situation happened. And I just feel like I've been crying. Like I just feel so grief stricken over it. And I'm just crying a lot. And I watched her as tears began to well in her eyes. And I could tell that she was feeling very heavy. And in that moment, I paused her for a second and I said, hey, when's your period about to come? When's your period due? And she said, in about a week. And I said, okay, let that be the backdrop to this. Why did I do that? Why did I, instead of stopping and validating her and expressing how difficult this must be, and how hard it is, and God, I can understand why that would make you so sad and make you so grief-stricken. Why did I stop that and stop and ask her about her period? Her emotions in regard to that situation were very real, and they mean something, right? They obviously mean that this is something that is particularly difficult for her, and from knowing her, I understand that this is actually related to some trauma she experienced in the past. But the reason I stopped at that point and I brought that up is because this is really important to understand for our mental well-being as women. Our hormones, especially when our period is coming up or during the period, can dial up the level of pain and emotion that we feel. And if we don't take a step back and if we don't have that level of awareness to realize, oh, this is what's going on, what can end up happening is we almost blame ourselves and think that something is going horribly wrong, when in reality, it's just a magnifying glass on what we're experiencing because of these hormone shifts. Cue modern society. We live in a society that does not care about a woman's menstrual cycle. And yet we come from a deen that is very mindful of it. You ever think it's a coincidence, subhanAllah, that while a woman is on her period, she's given time off from salah, which includes not having to wake up for fajr early in the morning? You ever think it's a coincidence that while on your menses, you're not supposed to fast? You're not even allowed to fast. It's not that, oh, this is an option. You're actually forbidden. The extent of wisdom in that, subhanAllah, and mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He puts a hold on two major acts of worship that can actually be very taxing on our body. Fasting is extremely taxing on the body, and especially for women during menstruation, because we do not have the levels of hormones to be able to offset the starvation state, which is what's actually happening when we're entering a prolonged fast. And at the same time, the not having to wake up for fajr allows for an opportunity for greater rest for women. Now, of course, there are other fiqhi reasons. I'm not saying that this is the reason. Allahu alam. There are particular fiqhi reasons as to why we're not able to fast and make salah during our periods. But what I'm hinting at, or trying to get us to look at more closely, is there's a mercy in that, and we have to come to our well-being with that level of awareness, because our deen already does that. And if we don't, what ends up happening is we will end up getting beaten up and burnt out. When the Quran says that the female is not like the male, right? This wasn't just a biology lesson. It's a reminder to us that Allah literally created us hormonally different. And we don't live in a society that respects that. For women who work a 9 to 5 or whatever, it doesn't matter what stage of your menstrual cycle you're at. It doesn't matter how exhausted you are. It doesn't matter how energized you are, right? You're expected to show up and do the same thing. If you're not familiar with the menstrual cycle, I'm not going to pop up a picture, but I'll walk you through a few different the different phases. So obviously we have the first 1 to 7 days, which is the menstrual portion. That's where you have your period. That's where you're actually bleeding. Following that, we enter into the follicular phase. Now, the follicular phase is where your physical energy starts to come up, and this is a point where your different hormones are going to start to pick up towards later end until you ovulate. And actually, a lot of people don't realize this, but as women, we have testosterone too. It's not to the level of men whatsoever, but we have testosterone, and that testosterone starts to pick up. Testosterone is really important as a hormone because it's actually a very important hormone for motivation and energy levels. And so that starts to pick up. Eventually, around ovulation is when a woman will have the most energy, the most focus, the most mood stability, the most endurance towards stress. But following ovulation, we enter into what's called the luteal phase. And the luteal phase is basically where the PMS starts, right? This is where energy starts to drop because progesterone is starting to rise and drop. And then you can find yourself much more easily stressed. There are a lot of physical symptoms that can come here. This is where women start to feel that, sometimes warning cramps is what I like to refer to them as, breast tenderness. Their skin might start to look more dull. They might have more difficulty focusing. They might be more emotionally labile. You might find yourself more emotional, just having, mood swings. You feel more sad easily, right? Something that wouldn't make you sad typically all of a sudden is making you want to cry, or something that wouldn't anger you usually, or if it did, you'd be able to handle it, is making you extremely angry. And so that starts to happen in the luteal phase. And then you get hit with the menstrual cycle, or you get hit with your menses, right, where you're bleeding. Energy drops significantly. In the very beginning stages, usually day 1 to 3, you'll start to have a lot more of those physical effects, right? Obviously, cramping can happen. Your metabolism spikes significantly. You need more calories. Your body's burning a lot more energy, and you start to feel very tired. You're literally losing iron, and iron is actually the molecule that's needed for our hemoglobin, which attaches to attaches to oxygen. It's literally part of how our body oxygenates our organs and our tissues. It requires iron. And in that moment, we lose iron. By the way, the number one cause of iron deficiency anemia in women is menstrual bleeding. So what is the point of me saying all of this? It's to say, for so many of you women, you're not aware of this, and it is going to screw you up mentally because you can't clock, when am I starting to get anxious? And it's actually just a hormone switch, right? It's just my estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone kind of levels differing, versus when am I anxious because I truly have something anxious to be something to be anxious about. When am I feeling low and depressed because I'm just like, my estrogen has plummeted, versus when am I feeling low and depressed because there's actually something wrong and I need to address it. What are some ways to start getting in touch with this? What are some ways to actually, because it makes a huge difference, I promise you. It makes a huge difference in your mental health. Here are 3 things that you can do. Number 1, if you don't already track your period, track your period. Get an app. There are plenty of free apps. If you want to pay for an app, that's fine too. But start tracking, even if your period is irregular, even if you don't know when it's going to come. This is going to be very helpful data, not just for you, but if there ever ends up being an issue that you have to see a medical provider for, us having that information is very, very helpful. Number 1. Number 2, track your moods and your mood changes. Oftentimes we'll put in the days where, your period starts or your period ends, but track what days do you typically find that you get more anxious, or you get more irritable, or you feel more stressed. That way you can start to identify, coming up any anxiety that I feel, any anger that I feel, I know what it's attributed towards, or I know what's at least putting a magnifying glass on what I'm typically feeling. And the last point is start to schedule your month as much as you can around your menstrual cycle. On the days where you feel more energized and you feel more excited, that ovulation time, if you're obviously menstrual cycle is more regular and you know when that time is, that's where you want to do things that are a little more involved. That's where you want to do things that are going to involve that are going to involve a little more mental energy or a little more physical exertion. If you are coming up on your period, that's a time to retreat. That's a time to start identifying, okay, I'm not going to be able to pray anymore. What can I do religiously to make sure my iman doesn't dip? If we can start looking at that, it's going to be really, really helpful. It's very, very common that, we hit a wall in our routines because of these shifts in our hormones, which significantly shift our energy levels and our stress levels. And then we can start to blame ourselves instead of realizing that this is always how it was meant to be, and I can work with it instead of work against it. I hope this is really helpful for any of the ladies who are watching this, inshallah. And I hope some of you guys actually take this advice, because every one of my clients who has put this into practice has found that it has had a profound effect on their mental well-being, period. So I didn't do that intentionally. So if you enjoyed this video, then please like and subscribe, and comment below, inshallah, any questions that you have. And if you are once again looking for coaching, then please go to the links in my description. And thank you so much for watching. Assalamu alaikum.